think it's a scandal. And there is not enough attention on this problem. It's partly, as I say, because some people over-egg it and misunderstand what is happening here. But I think it's for another reason as well, which is that this comes to the heart of an absolutely key aspect of our own failing as a society. And for this, I think you can extrapolate this out further than Britain. I once spoke to a woman in a town in the north of England who had had her divorce overseen by a local Islamic cleric who, among other things, in her own words, didn't do anything to help her except phoned her up drunk one night on his mobile phone trying to make a pass at her. But, you know, this woman said to me at one point, a long way into our discussions, she said, you know, all my life in Britain, and by the way, this is a woman who'd been born and brought up in Britain. She spoke with a North Country accent. She said, all my life in Britain, I've been told what my rights are as a Muslim woman. And nobody has ever told me or explained to me what my rights are as a British woman. And there you see the absolute failing point of the so-called multicultural model. I don't mean a multiracial society or a multi-religious society. I mean a society that doesn't merely accept difference, but encourages it and aggravates it. There is the end point.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think on that depressing note, I think we should move on to the even more depressing subject, possibly, of the candidates for the GOP in the presidential election. I mean, many things fill me with despair right now, but just looking at a candidates list where Gingrich scintilla of conservatism in either of those two, Douglas?
I see bits, yeah, absolutely. I just don't see the whole package. Look, I mean, it's clear to my mind that Republicans in America don't really want to beat Obama. Sorry to come out with that so bluntly, and apologies to Republican listeners in the US, but it strikes me as being obvious at this stage that they don't really want to beat Obama and they don't really think he can be beaten. And I think that a demonstration of that is that the field has been so weak this time. There hasn't been, and will not be now, a proper, serious debate or a proper, serious contest between serious contenders, the best that the presidential position should have, contending for it. You know, most, if not all, of the most serious contenders who should have taken place and taken part this time have waited. They've waited till next time when they think they stand a better chance of getting in. In other words, they've completely subsumed. They've subsumed their own the national interest beneath their own personal ones. They work it out. It's a terrible drag running for office all this time. It's extremely expensive. It takes a lot out of you. It puts your family, as we've seen already, through absolute hell. Everyone knows that the Chicago style of doing things, which Obama and his friends will bring to this election, even more than previous ones, will make things extremely bitter and unpleasant. And most people decide they don't want to put up with that. They'd rather have an easier ride next time and sail straight into the White House. As I say, I don't see after this any persuasive evidence that the Republicans mean to win this race.
Right. So first of all, name the guilty men who didn't stand, who should have stood. Oh, and woman, I suppose.
The list of that, of guilty men and indeed guilty women, is too long. I would just say the following, is that, for instance, the Tea Party candidates in this race have, by and large, been a disaster. And I say that with no relish, because I think one of the most obvious and necessary things in American politics right now is to be able to take on the case and some of the arguments that the Tea Party have been making and to treat them seriously and to try to dry up this ground between Washington and the rest of the country. I mean, I was in America the other week. I did about 15 cities, I think, and got a fairly good flavour, I think, of feeling across the country. And I think that the deficit between Washington and the rest of the country is serious and should be taken seriously. So, that being said, the candidates who are seen as having come with Tea Party support have done what I'm afraid they did last time round, which is that they have self-immolated. It's sort of inevitable in any grassroots movement that that among the people who come forward and come forward very fast, you'll get embarrassments. You'll get people who have to deny they've ever been a witch,
yes,
and so on. That doesn't mean the case isn't a serious one which needs to be listened to. But I think the nature of these things is that the people who shoot forward very fast from pretty much nowhere end up having things in the woodshed, having things in their backgrounds, having things usually just in their range of competencies and knowledge, which would normally have been ironed out or dealt with by some years more in the public political eye. So I think what you're left with is, this situation where conservatives are basically saying, as I think you did, James, the other week in Florida, that, does it have to be Romney?
Yes, but there is a view, isn't
when you're running a campaign for the most important job in the world, it would be good if a candidate was put forward, who all of whose potential supporters were saying, does it have to be him? If they weren't saying that, it would be a good thing, it seems.
It seems to me too, but there is a view abroad, and I see it a lot I see it a lot in the comments on Ricochet, that what people want is somebody who understands the political system, somebody who is experienced is the word I keep hearing used. But it seems to me that an experienced candidate is somebody who has been corrupted by the system. Look at Gingrich. Look at how he took $1.4 million from Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. That would seem to rule him out of contention immediately. If that's experience, please give me somebody who's completely naive and innocent. Because,
sure, and absolutely. And remember, in case the Democrats try this time round, I hope American listeners will bear in mind, of course, that Obama was the least experienced president in history.
Yeah,
least experienced. So when people try to use that against Republican nominees next time round, I think that the Republicans should certainly be swift in firing that charge straight back at the Democrats. But I do think, and I think you hit on a key thing here, James, because you're right. This is a central problem. Washington appears to corrupt the people who are there. It makes them, as you say, part of the system. I remember the most brilliant question I've ever been asked at any event, I think pretty much here in Britain, was some years ago when a young conservative activist said to me, after a speech, said, "When does it happen?" I said, when does what happen? When does it happen, he said, that people who say what you say, people who argue genuine, basic conservative ideas, go to Westminster and completely change those ideas? What's the tipping point? And it's a great question. I wish I had a great answer.
Yeah, when they attend their first Bilderberg meeting, I should think. It certainly seems to apply to the heads of state. The way David Cameron has gone. Not that he was ever not going to go native, but he really does essentially seem to believe in the same global political project that all the other EU, heads of state believe in. He's not interested in defending Britain's interests. It's beyond that. It's this global political class. And I've said this before. I think one of the greatest threats to the world today, the real problem in the world, is that there is this massive division now between what I would call the political corporatist banker class and the rest of us, just the people who want to earn an honest buck, who want to be left free from interference by the state in our lives. And at the moment, in the US, you've got representing the GOP, despite all the lessons of the Tea Party, you've got the two main GOP candidates who are both big government, corporatist, political class problems. They don't believe in smaller government. They don't really believe in the values of the Constitution. I absolutely despair.
Yes, I mean you hit on the key thing, which is this political class, which now exists across all of our countries. Really, I mean, it is. Having just talked about my jet setting just now, I hope I'm not accused of being part of it. But I think there's a difference between having an admiration for and an interest and a curiosity and a desire to know more about other countries and other cultures around the world. There's a difference between that and then the political version, which you see growing up now, where people effectively don't feel like, when they're in the political class, they merely have to answer to their electorate. You know, there was a great example of this in the recent Canadian elections. With Michael Ignatieff, who's a brilliant man in all sorts of ways, but he a former professor at Oxford, indeed at Harvard. He's written terrific books and a deep thinker and an intelligent man. But he got into this class of person, and at just before the last election in Canada, when he was trying to run for office and to lead his party, the Liberal Party, to victory, he said at one point in the campaign, he described Canada as, I think I've got this right, the place, if I needed a place to call home, it would be the place I would call home. As if mere citizenship was beneath him. As if merely living in a country and calling yourself a citizen of that was so last century. And the fact is that a lot of members of the political class in Britain, America, Canada, and other major Western democracies do feel like that. I always say there are two primary motivations, I believe, in people's lives in democracies and in non-democracies. The first is to be free, and the second is to belong. And that of those two, they are often thought of as being in some way in contravention to each other, in some way contradictory. And it's true that they do great in certain places. They do undoubtedly, in very small bits, find conflict with each other as ideas and as aspirations. But I would say that among the political class, the need to belong, in the sense of belonging to a country or a nation or a people or anything like that, is just not felt anymore. They belong to something else. They belong to a type of person. They belong to an international group of people. They belong to other people like them who don't feel the need to belong.
Yes.
And behind that are these poor old sods, us, who do wish to belong to things and who have the awful task of having to choose one of these anti-belongers to vote for.
Yeah. You're very wise, Douglas. Now, I'd like to close on a subject which I think we are possibly going to disagree over, which is Ron Paul. I mean, looking at the candidates list, thinking what we do about Romney and Gingrich, thinking what we do about Obama, I think we can probably agree that he would not be ideal to lead the US out of the greatest depression ever. I think we can agree that another Obama term would be disastrous for the world and probably hasten the decline of the West. Ron Paul, I know he gets a visceral reaction from a lot of American conservatives, and I understand what they say about his foreign policy, and sometimes it strikes me that he almost makes himself unelectable by some of the things he says about Iran, for example. I mean, I think that you and I could agree that Iran probably is a threat that